Hello, welcome to Oceanic Oracle. My name is Ari and today I'm going to be going through some romance recommendations. I've gone through my shelves and I've grabbed a few of my favourites. I've tried to grab as many as I can. I have historical romances, I have a classic, and I'm sure everyone knows it. I have a few YA contemporaries, some to do with romance, some to do with self-love and discovery. I have some fantasy, and I have a large stack of contemporary adult romances and new adult romances actually. And I thought I would just share them because why not? I'm going to timestamp everything below, so feel free to skip if you want. You don't have to watch the whole thing if you're only interested in a certain subgenre of the romance genre. You may not even be interested in romance. You may just want to skip to the fantasy because fantasy is more romance subplot. If you're into that, I guess we should get into it. The first category I'm going to start with is obviously the classic. The classic that I'm recommending is, to no one's surprise, Pride and Prejudice. This is like the original hate to love book. It's sort of where all the hate to love stories come from. They all stem from here. This is a lovely copy that my youngest sister bought for me ages and ages ago, and I absolutely love it. I just really treasure it and I absolutely love the story. This story follows Elizabeth Bennet. She is the second daughter of a 5-child household. All those children are female, and this happens in a time where the estate got entailed to the closest male relations. So this book follows Elizabeth Bennet and her interactions with the social classes around Hertfordshire, and this is obviously about the relationship between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. Now the title says it all, Pride and Prejudice. That's basically what the story's about. It's about learning about your flaws, acknowledging them, and learning and growing. I absolutely love this story. It's one of my favourites and I think it's a really good romance. If you're into romance and you're trying to get into classics, this is a really good one to start off with. Everyone should at least read Pride and Prejudice in their lifetime. I saw an interesting adaptation that's coming out. I think it's a sapphic version of Pride and Prejudice that's coming out soon. Depends if it's actually in stock at my local bookshop, but oh well. This is the classic that I would recommend you pick up. Jane Austen is really easy to understand. I really appreciate her romance writing. If you haven't read Pride and Prejudice, definitely pick it up. The next, I guess, genre card that I'm going to talk about is YA contemporary. One of them is romance and the other is, I guess, leaning more towards older YA. The contemporary romance I'm going to talk about is Don't Hate the Player. This is a really fun romance. This takes place at a high school and the romance follows two competitive gamers. So you have Amelia and you have Jake. They both play for two different competitive video game teams. Amelia keeps her gaming habits a secret from her mum and from everyone else. She's a straight A student. She's like top of the class. Amelia's family and all her friends don't know about her talent as a video gamer. And she becomes the first female player on this really competitive team. She wasn't expecting to get recognised at an esports event, but there we go. Jake Hooper recognises her. Jake has had a massive crush on Amelia for a long time. It's like rivals and then friends and lovers. It's just really cute. I think lots of people would enjoy this. I just think it's a really interesting YA contemporary, and I think if you're looking for a newer release, this came out last year. If you haven't picked it up, you should definitely pick it up. So the next YA contemporary that I'm going to be talking about is actually one that isn't a romance. It's more a self-love book. It's a book where the main character learns to accept themselves for who they are. I'm sure lots of people have read this or have heard of this. It's Loveless by Alice Oseman. This has really good aro-ace rep, so aromantic, asexual representation. Our main character is asexual and the story is her discovering her sexuality. The story starts off with Georgia not understanding herself, especially compared to her peers. This book follows her first year at university, so like the end of her time at secondary school and the start of her year in Durham. Stuff like this is really important. The topics discussed are fantastic. This book is great for an aro-ace main character and the representation for that. If you have kids questioning themselves and wondering why they don't feel the same way that their peers are. I think having access to books like these is fantastic. The representation in here is really, really good. And I think Alice Oseman just does a fantastic job in her books as well as her comics. So the next one I'm going to be recommending is actually the Heartstopper volumes. This is a YA graphic novel, boy meets boy romance, and it's really, really cute. The 4th volume came out early last year. It was fantastic. I went through all of them so quickly. I really appreciate the story. The Netflix adaptation is coming out soon, hopefully. They also have rugby in it, and I've played rugby most of my life, and I really appreciate the sports stuff. And the representation in here is also fantastic. Again, it is a book about learning to accept yourself for who you are. One of the main characters discovers more about his sexuality. The characters in the book are diverse. You have lots of different representations as well as lots of different familial backgrounds. I think books like these are extremely important, particularly for younger members of the LGBTQIA+ community. It's really important to have that representation and to see that you are not alone. If you're looking for a fun graphic novel series, definitely check out Heartstopper. It's fantastic. Lots of people really love it. The art style is great. First one really hot, like, just like my heart. Moving on. The next section I'll go with will be my fantasy section. I have another YA romance recommendation in this section, but it definitely belongs in this section because it's a fantasy romance book. What can you expect? The book I'm talking about is Cinderella is Dead. This is the UK edition. I think the cover of this book is stunning. This is a sapphic YA fantasy romance. It follows our main character Sophia. Sophia lives in a world where the story of Cinderella actually happened, and it happened 200 years ago. Every year the kingdom hosts a ball to any older man or like men of eligible age turn up and marry a girl. The thing is that these girls have 3 chances. The first one starts when they're 16, and if they're on their 3rd and final one, if they fail to get a match, they get exiled from the kingdom. Now, our main character, Sophia, doesn't want anything to do with that. She'd much rather go off and marry her best friend, and she's afraid that the girl that she loves is actually going to be chosen at this ceremony as well, and they won't be able to be together. So this sparks a quest to escape the kingdom and to figure out loopholes. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, I believe. I think this reimagining of like a classic fairy tale with a twist on it was so clever. And I think if you're into sort of like fairy tale retellings and you want a fantasy romance book, which is YA, you should definitely check it out. This is a great book. This is a standalone, so you don't have to read it in a series if you don't want to commit to a series. And the blue looks so nice, and like that dress, I recommend it. The next book I'm going to be talking about in this section is The Night Circus. This is an enemies to lovers romance, or rivals to lovers, I should actually say. This book follows a magical circus, which is the stage for a competition between 2 dueling magicians. The night circus turns up unannounced at night. One day it just shows up and it's there, and it's only open at night. So you can stay as long as you like during the night, so long as you're gone in the morning when the sun comes up. I'm just a big fan of it. It's more magical realism as opposed to a completely separate, this is set in our world, but it's set in the 1800s. It was just a really interesting take on magical realism as well as historical fiction, and a romance in there as well. The thing that I really liked about this book is it was so lyrical. I think the romance in here, it was really well thought out, because it didn't just focus on our 2 main characters. It also talked about things that went on in the background. It felt very 3-dimensional. If you're interested in stuff like that, definitely check this out. I'll do my last sort of short section before I get on with my giant stack of contemporaries. The series I'm going to talk about is Julia Quinn's historical fiction series. I have read all of the books in these respective series, but I'm just going to talk about the first books that I have in them. The first one being the Bridgerton prequels. So this is because of Miss Bridgerton. You can see the rest of my prequels. This series follows what happens before Bridgerton. So if you have watched the show, or if you're interested in the show, I'm sure you would actually enjoy the book series. Even though it says it's a Bridgerton prequel, it actually follows a family of Rokesby boys. Each book is for a single man in their siblings, so there are 4 of them. The first book follows the oldest one, and as you can see, we have a Bridgerton So because of Miss Bridgerton, there is smut in here. I think the rest of these all have smut in them. So if you are uncomfortable reading smut, you don't have to read these. As I say, you can always skip those sections if they really make you uncomfortable. You don't have to read them. Who's gonna know what you read in your own books? Like, anyway, this series is really fun. I really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars, the rest of them all 5 stars. The tropes for each one were just really fun. This was hate to love. This one is like, you have amnesia and I lied saying that I was your wife when I'm really not your wife, and you don't know that I'm not your wife. That one was really interesting. This, if you like sort of piratey romances, this one's a good one. It's about a privateer, so not a pirate. This was my favourite, I think, of the whole lot of them. This was so much fun. You have the one bed trope, you have the like damsel in distress saving the saving the guy. I'm actually tempted to go and reread this, but it was the time. And then this one is Marriage of Convenience. So you have a variety in those prequels, but the other series I'm talking about is obviously the Bridgerton series. I've talked about this a lot, and I'm sure lots of people know about the Bridgerton series. Well, I don't really have access to many other historical romances because in my local bookshop, I think the only books that they really have in historical romance is the Bridgerton collection, basically. Like, I do wish they would expand it actually, because it would make things more interesting. Yes, we should move on. These 2 books I've talked about before on my channel, and I'm sure people will be aware of them. I'm talking about Casey McQuiston's work, so Red, White and Royal Blue, as well as One Last Stop. These 2 are contemporary romances. They are LGBTQIA+ romances, so you have a sapphic romance and you have an Achillean romance. This was Casey McQuiston's first novel, and this is their second novel. Casey McQuiston is a non-binary author. You have your sapphic romance and you have your Achillean one. There is smut in both of these. I have annotated one, not the other, but this one was newer to me, whereas I have read this a lot. They're just really fun romances. They're new adult romances as well, and I think what some people might not know is that it actually makes a ton of difference reading about people who are your age and who are experiencing similar things to what you're experiencing. It makes such a difference, at least for me as a reader, reading books about people who are my age. The main character in this book is 23, and I just turned 24. So when I read this, I was 23 and I was like, yeah, no, I understand exactly what you're talking about, particularly just housing situations. Both of these are really good. This trope is enemies or hate to love, I should say, whereas this one is sort of like, there's no real trope for One Last Stop. Like, a girl sees a girl on a train and has a crush on her, and the stuff goes from there. This also has a science fiction twist on it because you have time travel. So the girl here, Jane, she has been stuck on this Q train since the 1970s, and August, our lead role in this one, whose point of view is told, tries to help her get unstuck. So it's sort of like strangers to friends to lovers. It's just really fun, and I think if you are in your early 20s and you're looking for books that feature main characters that are similar to your age, I think both of these are good. They're just really good options. And the next series I'm going to talk about is the Brown Sisters trilogy. So the first book in the series is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Second book is Take a Hint, Danny Brown, and the third and final book is Actual Age, Eve Brown. Talia Hibbert is one of my favourite romance writers, hands down. Of the 3, my favourite is actually Actual Age, Eve Brown. I'll go through the general tropes. In Get a Life, Chloe Brown is chronically ill. She has fibromyalgia. This is about her going through a near-death experience and realizing, hey, I actually want to enjoy my life as much as I can. So she writes a list, so a Get a Life list, and she slowly goes down and crosses things off. Along the way, she meets Red. They don't really like each other at first, they just tolerate each other. But as Chloe starts to move along in her Get a Life list, she realizes that she needs help, and she goes to Red because he looks like he could be a good teacher. I enjoyed this book, I found it fun. Moving on to the next one in the series, which is Take a Hint, Danny Brown. If you like fake dating, you will like this book. Danny Brown, or Danica Brown, I should say, is a PhD student who is working as a teacher at one of the universities. Dani Brown focuses on her career. She is very career driven. So because she's very career driven, she doesn't really have time for romance. Dani is bisexual, so you have bisexual representation in this book as well. While she's teaching at university, she actually has this sort of like friendly relationship with the security guard working the front desk. One day there's a fire alarm that goes off in Dani's building and she has no idea that it's just a drill. So she freaks out and gets stuck. Zaf, or Zafir, goes in to save her and they walk out in the pose that you can see on the cover, which then sparks all these kids taking photos and posting them on Twitter and Instagram, shipping the two of them. And the two of them decide to fake date each other, because Zafir is actually an ex-pro rugby player and he's needed to drum up some support for his charity work that he's been doing that he doesn't really post about. Dani is also looking for a new person to sleep with. She plans to seduce Zaf behind the scenes, whereas Zaf wants to be in an actual relationship with Dani. If you're looking for like women in academic positions, this one was great. Moving on to my favourite, Actually Age Eve Brown. So this follows the last sister, Eve Brown. So this book is a grumpy sunshine romance. Eve is very sunny. She has a very easygoing personality. She's able to get on well with almost everyone. One day, after she's quit her new business for the nth time, because she starts up lots of businesses, but as soon as she reaches the first sign of struggle, she always drops out. Her parents pull the final straw. They cut her off from her trust fund and tell her that in order for them to reinstate it, she needs to show that she can hold one single position for a year. And in response, Eve runs off to the Lake District. While she's there, she sees a sign in her little B&B establishment saying that they need help, or help wanted is on the screen, and that's when she meets Jacob. Jacob is the main male lead in this one and he is autistic. You have autism rep in this book. I really enjoyed the character dynamic between the two of them. After going to an interview for the position that they had available, which is to be a new chef for the B&B, so the bed and breakfast, if you don't know what B&B means. Eve goes back to her car and she drives around for a bit. She stops in front of a bakery and Jacob has a chat with one of his friends and they decide that Eve's actually probably the best option out of any of the people who have applied. So they run off to go and find her. Jacob spots her in a car, goes behind her, and Eve accidentally hits him with her car, resulting in a concussion. And the story goes from there. Eve has to take over the B&B because Jacob can't manage it because he's concussed, and you really shouldn't do much if you are concussed. Speaking from experience, I really enjoyed this book. Of the three books, this is my favourite, but they're fantastic. And if you're looking for contemporary adult romance and you want smut, pick those up. Next book on here is another fake dating book. It's The Kish Quotient. This again has autism rep. This is a story about Stella. Stella is autistic and it's about her journey to find and understand romance and love. She hires a male escort to teach her what a relationship is like. This has more smut than the average book that I've talked about. I will say that. It has more smut than the average book. I have read the first two books. I have the third book in the series on my shelf here, which I got for Christmas. I really enjoy Helen Huang's writing. The romance is steamy. The actual plot is actually taken into account. Some books are definitely more smut heavy than plot heavy. This has a nice mix of both. So if you're looking for a new sort of fake dating romance with autism representation, you should definitely check out The Kiss Quotient and the following books in the series. So The Bride Test comes after this, and then The Heart Principle. The other fake dating book I have on here is The Love Hypothesis. This book has done the rounds. It did the rounds last year. I studied marine biology at university, and the experiences that our main character Olive experiences in this book I could relate to a lot. I really enjoy the fact that this is about a woman in STEM. So this follows Olive, our main character, and she gets into a fake relationship with one of the lab supervisors. Not her lab supervisor, obviously. She's a third year PhD student and she's trying to get her two friends, so her ex-boyfriend, who really likes her best friend. She's trying to get them together and she's trying to convince them that she's moved on. She may have lied to her best friend telling her she was on a date when she was actually in the lab, and then she turns up to the lab. Well, again, it's sort of like a sunshine and grumpy character as well. Basically, Olive ends up dating this guy that lots of people in the lab don't like, Adam. Adam is fairly strict and to the point, I should say. Lots of people don't really like him. Once Olive warms up to him, she sees that there's more to him than meets the eye, and it's just a lot of fun. I can't knock a book that has STEM representation, because as a woman in STEM myself, I really appreciate it. I am looking forward to reading whatever Ali Hazelwood comes out with. Hopefully her new books don't disappoint me either. And I'm just gonna enjoy my life reading about women in STEM, because that's my lived experience. The last book that I have on here, to no one's surprise, it happened one summer. So I read this in February. I really enjoyed this book. This is a Grumpy Sunshine Romances. Oh, look at that. These last few books have been Grumpy Sunshine romances. You can tell it's one of my favourite. This follows an influencer who has grown up in LA in a fairly affluent household. One day after a big breakup, has this party which ends in her arrest, and in response to this, her stepfather sends her to the town where her mum is originally from and where her mum met her dad. So Piper goes up from LA to Washington and they go to a little fishing, it's a fishing town basically. Their first night, Piper bumps into this grumpy, gruff fisherman, this guy here called Brendan. He basically gives the impression that he doesn't think that she can do this. So Piper takes everything on her shoulders and tries to achieve everything. Well, it's all about this relationship, and it's about them challenging each other, challenging them to step out of their shells. I really liked it. Tessa Bailey's smut is great. So if you haven't read any of Tessa Bailey's stuff, I definitely recommend It Happened One Summer. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe if you want more bookish content. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, depending on when you're watching this. Stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys.